I actually came through the World Trade Center twice that day. I was scheduled to speak before a group of about 40 or 50 CEOs of listed companies on the New York Stock Exchange. And when I came through the first time, I realized I had left something that I needed for the presentation at home, reverse course, and came back through, exiting the World Trade Center not many minutes before the first plane hit. I came here to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and we didn't see the visual evidence in the first plane immediately. There was just a story that a plane had struck the World Trade Center. About a week before, a parasailing accident in the harbor had somebody accidentally parasail right into the Statue of Liberty. So at first everybody thought it might be another small plane accident. Pretty soon the television cameras were on it, and it became evident that it was a much bigger incident. Shortly after that, we discovered that the next plane came in, and everyone here on the floor, already watching all of the different TV sets down here, saw the second plane fly in, and everybody began to realize this was terrorism. There could be no other answer. The stock market had not been open. The opening was delayed till we figured out what was going to happen next. We set up a small health triage room in the 30 Broad Street floor. That way people from outside who might be injured by any of the falling debris, have shock or breathing difficulty, could be treated by the paramedics there. One of the early casualties of the problem was that the cell phones were not fully working, and many of the landlines were not. At the time, I was running the floor operations for PaineWebber, and luckily our phones were intact. So I immediately sent word out across the floor and upstairs to employees of the stock exchange that if they needed to make an emergency call, to either assure members of their family that they were all right, or to verify that family members were all right, they were welcome to come down and use our lines. And we had lines forming because not all the other phones were busy working. As we waited to assess what was going to happen, and the management requested that everybody stay inside if possible, and pretty soon we heard a very loud rumble, which turned out to be the first tower falling. Once that happened, it became pretty evident that there would be no business done that day, and that no one knew where the next step would go, as rumors spread that planes were headed for Washington and other areas, perhaps to hit the Capitol Dome or maybe even the White House. We began to see people coming in from outside. The exchange cooperated by passing out some terry cloth towels that you could use as a kind of respiratory mask in case you had any difficulty breathing with all the soot and whatever that was coming down. My son, who worked here on the floor with me, and I waited around to see if there were any more people that could be helped. And I would say around 1 o'clock, we decided to head out to try and make our way to Jersey City, where I live. We dampened the terry cloth towels, put some reserve towels in our pockets to use later, and then we headed out. We walked outside, and things were still falling. Envelopes, a variety of different items that may have come from people's desks. Unfortunately, there actually were scavengers outside with hospital masks on, picking up envelopes, looking to see if there was anything of value in them. My son restrained me. I was tempted to assault people, thinking that anybody would be ghoulish enough to try and profit from the terrible tragedy that was surrounding us. We walked about a half a block down Wall Street, and there were two young ladies in high heels and elegant dresses who apparently were very confused. They were headed to a luncheon or something. We asked them where they wanted to go. They were talking about moving uptown. The course they had selected would not have served them well. They would have come under all of the smoke and clouds that were there. We encouraged them to walk with us down toward the East River, and then we had assumed we would head uptown. When we reached the East River, we found a hodgepodge of small boats, fishing boats, small ferries, just simple outboard dinghies that people had pulled together to come to help. There was no line, no money, just which way are you going? I'm going to Jersey. Jersey boats are over here. And people went, Staten Island boats are over here. I need to get to Brooklyn. The Brooklyn boats are over here. And no cards were exchanged. Nobody asked for any money. It was just one New Yorker helping another. And we eventually boarded the boat, and we got over to Jersey City and got off where the Colgate clock is and began to walk up the hill to Journal Square, where I had my car parked. As we walked, we talked, and we began to notice that people were staring at us. And we didn't at first realize why, but it was because we looked like statues covered in soot and ash. And since we had been together from the minute we walked outside, we didn't really notice it, but everybody on the street did, and realized that we had come from somewhere very close to Ground Zero. And that prompted people from their stoops and storefronts to call out, "Can we help you fellas? Are you all right? Can we do anything?" We proceeded on up to Journal Square and managed to get my car, and I managed to go by side streets to an area where my son Peter could get a train out to Denville, where he lived. Several days later, the exchange was reopened, not because anybody needed to make money. The president and the governor and others had requested that we open the exchange to get the U.S. economy working again. People forget that one of the great fears at the time was about the economy. If Al-Qaeda had been a more quickly reacting operation, they might have sent 5 knapsack bombers to 5 Walmarts in 5 states and told them to stand on the longest line and then detonate the bomb. If they had done something like that, the U.S. economy would have ground to a halt. No mother would let her child out of the house. And that was a tremendous fear. We forget that in the early press conferences, President Bush was asked by several of the reporters in other crises in America, the people have been asked to sacrifice. In World War II, they sacrificed saving rubber, aluminum, a variety of other things. What should the American people do? And he came up with a phrase that was somewhat misunderstood and became a bit of a laugh line later on Saturday Night Live. He said, "Go shopping," but he meant it. The great fear was that the primary victim of the World Trade Center might be the U.S. economy. So it was important to get the exchange open. When we came to work from all the various places where people had been, you walked up streets that had temporary guardrails on them. You saw National Guard workers and policemen standing guard at certain intersections. Not much conversation. A simple thank you to them as you went by. There was no smile, no cheer. The only smiles happened to be on the faces on the missing person posters that the families had put up. It was a time that none of us will ever forget, and it was an important day for America. It showed that people could come together to help one another, and they were one in spirit, and thank God we have survived it roundly.